Standard physics operates on a quiet assumption. When explaining the nature of reality, physicists almost always require that space and time already exist. We call this smuggling, the act of relying on concepts like distance, geometry, or fields at the foundational layer of a theory without explaining where they come from. The PHYS 2.0 project enforces a strict methodological rule. Do not use as a premise the very thing you are trying to recover as a consequence. If your goal is to explain space and time, you cannot start with them. This rule necessitates stripping away the background manifold, the invisible stage where physics usually happens, and beginning the derivation from a complete void. Removing these starting assumptions forces a shift in perspective. We have to identify the minimum relational structure required to support an observable universe. This perfectly uniform grid of identical circles represents a universe of complete sameness. If every point is relationally identical, no observer could generate distinction. You couldn't tell up from down or before from after. A viable substrate must contain relational asymmetry, differences in how parts connect. Can this arise through simple one-to-one branching lines, like a family tree? No. Pairwise connections lack overlapping constraints. They drift apart loosely, failing to provide the rigidity needed for stable geography. Physical structure requires more than simple connection. It requires an architecture that holds itself together through competing relational tensions. Look at this network of intersecting clusters. This illustrates shell overlap, where individual nodes belong to multiple relational contexts at the same time, creating mutual constraint. To function as a space-like environment, this network requires a specific internal anatomy of both presence and absence. We define contact as the realized relationships within the structure, while void represents the structurally meaningful non-contact or slack within the system. This balance of contact and void creates the structural conditions for physical extension and distance to eventually emerge. If these connections turn over randomly, the structure decoheres. Unconstrained turnover tends toward a randomized cloud of noise rather than a stable geometry. Having excluded simple dyads and random noise, the project identifies a stable, coherence-preserving architecture, the relational substrate, as the most viable candidate for further derivation. The unity principle holds that the substrate and spacetime are a single structure. We avoid describing this as a transition where a mathematical object later becomes a physical one. Spacetime is the internal description of the substrate structure as read by an embedded observer. When the relational data is viewed from within, it resolves into the geometric grid we experience as reality. With the relational substrate established as a working best guess, we can move to the representational layer and begin deriving physics-facing consequences. In this framework, time is the internal reading of ordered relational asymmetry. It emerges as a sequence recoverable from within the structure itself. We can translate matter and motion in similar terms. Matter is a stable, localized deformation of the relational network, while motion is the persistent displacement of that pattern across the substrate. The relational substrate serves as a current working best guess. By refusing to assume unearned concepts, we establish a clean starting point for the real work of deriving the mechanics of the universe.